sing along. Come, let us sing. Come, let us sing. Sing to glory to the Lord.
Our next guest speaker comes to us from Eretz Israel, and we are so happy to have all of our guests here, but especially this next gentleman. If you are, any of you know anything about Israel National Radio, you know that our next guest is a prime mover of that operation. He and I actually have something kind of in common. I used to be what we call a program director here in this country, and so I know what his duties are, and I know what kind of job he's against. And of course, he's got a wonderful, he and his all of his fellow broadcasters, of which his wife Malka is one, do an amazing job. I listen to this radio station. Thank God for the internet. I listen to it every day. I know many of you do. It's like mainlining spiritual Israel into your veins and your ears every day. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate what you folks are doing there at Beit El. And he's a wonderful speaker. And if you've got any lullness from lunch, this man is going to wake you up. Yeshai Fleischer.
Well, I cannot tell you what a pleasure it is to be with you today. I mean it. I just changed my schedule around in my trip to America to coincide with this conference because it was important for me to be here. And the reason it's important for me to be here is because I believe in this movement. Okay? I believe in this, and I feel that this is a door that has opened up in our generation. I want to be part of it. I have been very lucky from the get-go to be part of all the organizations that I respect. So if it's Birthright, I've been a 4-time Birthright madrich, a guide on Birthright. So I've taken Jews for their first trip in Israel in their life 4 times. I've seen the tears of young Jews at the Western Wall for the first time. And that has been my privilege. If it's Nefesh B'Nefesh, which is the organization that brings American Jews home. When I say home, I mean to Eretz Israel. I've been on a flight, and I'm going to be on a flight again with immigrants coming home. For me, it's the greatest thing, just to touch redemption, to be part of what's going on now. It's awesome. And I've also been part of a political movement in Israel called Manhigut Yehudit, Moshe Feiglin. They're trying to bring a different spirit to Israel. Are they super successful? Maybe not yet, but we're part of that. And I feel just lucky to touch all those different movements. And what's given me the opportunity to touch those movements is the advent of the media, being a radio personality, and really just loving Israel and getting to do that full time. So I want to first thank Ray and Jim and everybody else that I've met here. First thing, Ray for setting up this conference and getting it all done. And I've met so many people here that I would characterize, some people would say I've met fans or listeners. I reject that. I don't have any fans. I have a show called Yishai and Friends. And the reason I call it that is because the people who listen to me and like what I say are my friends. And I have an extended friendship family. And I've met a lot of my friends at this conference. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say that he wanted people to get into media. He wanted to get people into radio. And he would say, you don't even know who you're touching. You don't even know. Okay, no numbers tell you how many people are listening. That person who's living out there in Iowa or in Oklahoma, somewhere out there, and it's their connection. We call it your connection to Israel, but it's their plug into this bigger thing. So I heed those words, and here at this conference I've gotten a chance to meet my friends and to see the people that we touch. And I want to say that this speech is titled, How Can Israel National Radio Help the No-Hide Movement? If anything, this conference has awoken me to redouble my efforts at Israel National Radio to make it even better. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the speech. Okay, so I flew into, that was the introductory remarks. Here's the speech. I flew into Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I actually needed to first go to Naples, but the cheaper ticket was to Fort Lauderdale. So we flew into Fort Lauderdale and we had some, here's a term I never ever use, time to kill. Don't ever use that term, in my opinion. We had time to live, okay? We had a little time to live in the airport, and there was a store called the Metropolitan Museum of Art store in the Fort Lauderdale Airport, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood. Is anybody familiar with that store? Yes? Very good. I went into that store, and I realized immediately that it wasn't so much about art, although there was recreations of Degas, the famous statues of the horses and the ballerinas and other art things that you could find at the Met, Van Gogh. I realized that this store was dedicated to the classics, the ancient world. They had refurbished or kind of remade jewelry from ancient times, coins, books about ancient times and the ancient world. And I looked throughout the whole store along with my wife Malka, and I want to tell you what I saw. I saw one thing over and over and over again. Egypt. Egyptology. There was Egypt everywhere. That you want to be buried like the Egyptians? Well, we got the Egyptian staff and all that stuff. You can take it home for $60. You want Egyptian jewelry? You could find it. Egyptian hieroglyphics on papyrus paper? No problem, it's there for you. You want to read about ancient Egypt? Here's a book. Okay, Egypt, Egypt, Egypt everywhere. And Egypt has a respectable place in the ancient world. But let's recall what Egypt is. Egypt is the society of enslavement. If you recall, there's this little book called the Bible, which one of the main storylines there is the exodus from this evil culture. The Jewish enslaved society comes out of Egypt, the enslaver, and that's the story of freedom. And therefore, it's no surprise that the Americans who founded this country took that story. And you know that the seal of America, the Great Eagle, was going to be one of the next options, was going to be the splitting of the Red Sea and kind of an American people going through it. Freedom. Freedom. That's the story, okay? That's simplified, but that's what it's all about. But here at the Metropolitan Museum of Art store in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, everything is dedicated towards Egypt. There's Egypt everywhere. Let me remind you one more thing about Egypt. Egypt is the society that was so materialistic that they literally believed that you do take it with you when you die. You take it with you. So therefore, we're going to pack gold and we're going to pack food right next to your burial plot so that we make sure that you take it with you. Okay? That's a sick society. Okay? And even today, you know, the most materialistic and hedonistic of societies don't think that you take it with you. But they thought so, okay? And you have a whole store dedicated to Egypt, Egyptology. Well, I looked around some more and I found that they had one other favorite. Can anybody guess?
Greek.
Rome. It was Rome everywhere. Remember Rome? Rome were the people that, when there was a temple to God in Jerusalem, came, destroyed it, did all kinds of lascivious things first to try to, you know, stick in their God first thing into our temple, then destroyed it. Then, in a fact that is known to archaeologists and people who are students of that era, took the money of the destroyed temple and built the Colosseum. The Colosseum in Rome. Now, the day the Colosseum was dedicated, there was some 5,000 animals murdered, killed, or slaughtered in their, you know, bestial ways, and people too were murdered on that day in blood sports. Okay, this was money taken from the temple, destroyed, sacked the temple, made the Colosseum the flip side of the temple, offered sacrifices in their way, in their barbaric ways, calling it fun and sport. Okay, so here's the story again, and if you want to wear Roman coins, if you're interested in Marcus Aurelius or Julius Caesar, you'll find out all about that. But there was one thing that I couldn't find in that store at the Metropolitan Museum of Art store in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I couldn't find anything Jewish. And when I say Jewish, I'm not talking about Jewish like bagels Jewish. I'm talking something from the ancient world that represented this amazing thing that existed. So there wasn't a mention of the Maccabees who revolted against Greek culture that is so prevalent today. There was no mention of the revolts against Rome, of a people who wanted morality over Roman culture, Okay, there was no mention of a temple in Jerusalem where people went to talk to God. There was no mention of King David. And there was certainly no mention of the Bible, which is the most popular book ever written. So there was no reprints of the beautiful decorated Bibles that have existed throughout ages. You know, throughout the ages, people used to inscribe with gold leaf Bibles. That used to be a classic thing. Do you know that in the ancient world, all map makers used to draw one thing? Terra Sancta, the Holy Land. King Richard the Lionhearted made every effort to get to Jerusalem and had to fight Salah ad-Din, who made every effort to keep Jerusalem. We're talking about an ancient world that is preoccupied with this thing called Jerusalem. Okay? That's what the ancient world wanted, cared about. It wasn't until people like Mark Twain risked life and limb to get to the Holy Land, to get to Terra Sancta, to Jerusalem. And yet you go into the Metropolitan Museum of Art store, and it ain't there. It ain't there. And there is a reason that it's not there. It's not there not because it's a coincidence or because there haven't been any books written on this topic. Because they didn't even have a Bible, and I know the Bible's in every hotel room. So it must be something else. And what it is that they're broadcasting a message. This is the world we'd like to reflect. This is the world we'd like you to think, to see. This is our world. Our world is Egypt. Our world is Rome. Our world is Greece. Our world is certainly not that controversial issue. Jerusalem. You don't want to touch it. It's controversial. But this taking it to the grave, so therefore, we promote that culture of, buy your cars and live your materialistic life and you'll take it to the grave. That is our world. That's what the Metropolitan Museum of Art store wants to broadcast to you. Well, I have a little prop here. My wife, God bless her, looked around some more in the store and finally did find one thing of Jewish import. It's a pop-up book. It's called The Ark. Okay? And this is I keep it in the package because we purchased it. It's really amazing. It's like one of these pop-up books that is quite complex than the pop-ups, not these simple pop-ups. Things are moving, things are happening. And I thought as I came into this airport how apropos it is that this is the one thing that symbolizes God's vision of this world. And I knew I was coming to this conference. And I want to show you how important the story of Noah is to the world. How this is the only thing that shines a light through this place that wants to recreate darkness of which the Jewish people fought and died against in Egypt and versus the Greeks and versus the Romans. And the one thing that is out there is Noah's Ark. I want you to take that to heart because that is at the heart of what we're talking about at this conference, which is not just your personal observance, okay? It's not about your personal observance. It's about something much bigger, a world revolution of consciousness. And that's what this conference is about. I don't want you to look. I used to have these meetings in New York City. We have an organization, Pro Aliyah, it's called Kuma. We used to have these meetings at J2 Pizza. Sometimes we'd have 6, 7, 8 people at these meetings. And you know what? People would say to me, wow, this meeting's a disappointment. I said to them, those people are gold. You're going to see those people. And 90% of those people that I met at those little meetings are in Israel today making a difference. Look around this room. I promise you, you're meeting the people that are making a difference. Your job is to solidify these contacts and to make this revolution evolve, an evolutionary revolution. Keep going. So remember for a second this book, the only thing that shone a light in the darkness of the airport. Why is this awakening that we are privy to in this room happening right now? What is the cause of it? I'd like to think that each one of us has had a particular calling from God, and that's why we are at the conference, because we realize that there's that there's a God in this world. But, my friends, we are all just human. Okay? Jew and Gentile, we are still people and very finite vis-a-vis the Lord. He has done something, he, capital H, has done something in the past 60 years which has never happened before. And that is why we are here in this room, in my opinion. And that is that he has started bringing the Jewish people back home to the land of Israel. Now, how does that connect to you? It does very much, in my opinion. You see, for 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been amongst the lands, the foreign lands, not the homeland. They've been tucked away in the lands of the Gentiles. And the Gentiles say to the Jews, while they're in their lands, they say something like this: I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear what you've got to say to me, because you're on my land now. You're in exile now. So you're going to listen to me. You've got forefathers, I got forefathers. In this case, I got George Washington, Madison, Franklin, Adams. We know them. We've got a constitution. You've got a Torah? Great. We got a constitution. And this is, of course, the best country that has ever offered up this discourse vis-a-vis the Jews. Other countries have said, you keep your head down, or we're going to keep it down for you. And while the Jewish people are amongst the other nations, they as though close up their ears. They don't want to hear it. It's as though, how should I describe it to you? Let's say, have you ever been in prison? I was in prison once. I wasn't imprisoned. I was on a class, a sociology class from Yeshiva University. They took us to prison. And it was an eye-opening experience, really. It was a very smart teacher who took us to prison to show us what it was really about. And I learned a lot in that little escapade to Rikers Island, including the many ways in which prisoners can hide razors and other things in order to fight with one another. But imagine if a prisoner would start giving you his theory on philosophy, his worldview. Well, you would take it with a grain of salt, because you would think, well, this person's on the outs. I'm going to listen to him. He's not a successful guy. He's on the bottom of the rung. And when the Jewish people are dispersed, it's as though people say, I'm not interested in your Torah. You've got nothing to teach me. You're clearly on the outs. And that's, by the way, what Christianity actually said. They said the Jews are on the outs, and the only reason they exist is in order to see us succeed. Right? Doctrine of the witness. That's the idea. So when God decides, after 2,000 years, that he is going to bring the Jewish people back home, and it does start to happen, and miracles start to take place, I'm talking about massive miracles. The wars. I'm not going to go through it because I know you know it. But from 48 to 56 to 67, even to 73, to, of course, 1976, the day that I was circumcised was the day where an Israeli commando unit flew all the way from Israel to Entebbe, Uganda, to save Jews. And that was, by the way, July 4th, 1976, the bicentennial of this great country. And when God brings the Jewish people back home and he shows them these miracles, the rest of the world also sees these miracles. And what we call today the evangelical movement, which is so friendly to Israel, where does it come from? Why are they so friendly to Israel? Because there is an Israel. Because God is bringing the Jewish people back home and they are saying, whoa, maybe that Old Testament stuff is true. Maybe their initial prophecies, what it says that God's going to bring them home, is right. And therefore they want to perk up and listen. And the Christians, they get together, they think of a new philosophy, dual covenant, or whatever we can come up with to, Christianity does that. They get committee from time to time, think a little bit, figure out how to, they will build a temple and then Jesus will come. That's it. All right? So they come up with, new ideas how to square it, but essentially the most important thing is they realize that there's something to it. And by the way, as I was sitting earlier and I was listening to some of the speakers and I saw people in the audience nodding, I just wanted to ask you, isn't it so obvious? Isn't it so obvious what we're talking about, that God is bringing the Jewish people back home, that the nations are going to be part of the great redemption? Isn't it the most unbelievably easy thing to understand? This is the Bible. This is the truth. It's happening. And yet so many people want to just figure out ways to, And I said a phrase one time that it came out of my mouth on my radio show. I was very proud of it. Later I looked it up on the internet. I found that I wasn't the first to originate that. But I said that Judaism says that man created God, got confused, that God created man in his image, right? God creates man in his image. What Christianity says is, let's create God in our image, all right? That's what the J-Man's all about. It's about creating God that looks like me. All right, so the corollary to what I just said, which is that the Christians are waking up to it, is that you guys are much more sophisticated and awakening to the full meaning of what it's really all about. You're not stuck in preconceived notions that you've been raised with, and you're traversing past the Christian ideas. And we have to be thankful that at least Christianity taught the Bible to the world. And it's a pleasure to speak with Bible-knowing Christians, always for me. And they come to Israel en masse. I calculate 7 Christians to every 1 Jew that comes to Beit El to listen. And when I speak to them, I say to them, you know where you are? You're in Bethel. You are where Jacob had his dream. And do you know what they do when I say that to them? They start to cry. They cry. They cry real tears. And I say to the Jews, I say, you know where you are? You're in Bethel. This is where Jacob had his dream. They go, mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. And I say to them, do you know that when the Christians come here, they cry? They cry. But I make it easy on them. I say, you Jews, you're used to miracles. I guess it's, I guess you're a little, a little more desensitized to, God's immediate presence in your life. So, the corollary to what I'm trying to say to you is that while we have been in exile for 2,000 years, you have been in exile for 2,000 years. What I mean by that is, if God didn't give you the ears to hear until the Jewish people have come back home, therefore you haven't had the opportunity to live a full spiritual life. And what's happening now is that the Jewish people are coming back home, and you're coming back home too, coming back to what you're really supposed to be. And that's the exciting thing about our period. It's that we're all coming back home. So therefore, if the blue fringe of the tzitzit is becoming a reality, that's part of the redemptive process. If kids are coming on birthright to Israel to, see their birthright for the first time, that's part of it. If the temple is being discussed as a viable thing, like Rabbi Richmond does. So he's changed my life. The temple is in my consciousness. I pray for a temple. I never prayed for a temple before until he showed me those images, explained to me what that life is all about. I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to reach spiritual maturation. I'm starting to understand. So when I read the Bible and it says, you shall sacrifice a young kid, and if I would have read that a few generations ago, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not sacrificing nothing. Now I'm just getting the edges of understanding. I'm starting to get it. And this conference, this holy congregation, and I want you to remember that the key word in Judaism is holiness. Holiness. Not just fulfilling rote commandments, but living a life of holiness. That's what your challenge is, in part. This congregation here is indeed the fruition of God's vision. And my coming back home and addressing you here is just part of that, and your push towards more is part of that. As it says, I mean, you guys read the Bible? Isaiah chapter 1, Micah chapter 4. It's right there. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to read. So the point that I wanted to make there is, just as we've been in exile, so too have you been in exile, and our return is your return. That's the point that I wanted to get across there. Now, you have a lot of work to do. I wrote down some notes about some of the work that you have to do. A few minutes ago, while the conference was going on, there was a ruckus coming from next door. Did anybody look at that? Did anybody go look at the sign?
I met the minister over there.
Yeah.
The pastor. He came over here.
Well, God bless him.
He was looking at the books, and I gave him a list of all the books in contact.
Well, you did your work.
Call us. We'll answer your questions.
That's great. That's great. And that's interesting that you say that. She said that, if you didn't hear, she said that the pastor from over there, who was part of J-Man congregation, whatever it's called over there, they were having a real kind of gospel type of awakening. What's that called? Hoda. And God bless him, because I always say to everybody who's very Christian, I say to them, at least you're a spiritual person. At least you're seeking spirituality. And we respect human beings. And we respect other Christians. We respect Muslims. We respect people who seek spirituality. Okay? But it's different levels. Okay? And that level is, people better than I have spoken on the topic of idolatry or where that is. But we give him respect. And the fact that that pastor came over here shows that he has an intelligent mind, and he's seeking answers and willing to ask questions, and I respect that.
He wanted to know what we were doing
Right.
in his room. He didn't hear.
Well, it's not his room, and this is not his world, it's God's world. And God has a thing or two coming, a thing or two to tell people, and he yearns for people to serve him properly and correctly. Therefore, you are going to have to, quote-unquote, fight Christianity. In your own family, in your own life, and certainly in your own community, you're going to fight that. Because you're going to fight untruths. Let's go back to that story of the Metropolitan store. Untruths are being constantly pushed against us. So you're going to have to push back. So that's step number one. Number two, does anybody, I know people have noticed this, have you noticed the irony of the flag of the No Hide movement? The gay, lesbian, bisexual, transsexual movement uses the same flag for the exact contradictory opposite message. I'm talking about, they are bringing immorality to the nations, and you're talking about bringing morality to the nations. It's uncanny. The only thing that I could think is like that is that money and the gold from the temple being turned into the Colosseum. Flip side of that coin, it's the dark force, taking that same energy and turning it into evil. They took our beautiful rainbow. And I gotta tell you something, I do not lie when I stand before you and say that when I was driving here today from West Palm Beach, Florida to Fort Lauderdale, there was a big, beautiful rainbow on exit 33 on Route 95. And I said, God up in heaven has done this on purpose to show you that he's with you, the Rainbow Covenant. And you're going to have to fight that. You're going to have to fight those people, because they are fighting not only to take people's minds, but to take over this country. It's happening. So you have a big fight on your hands. So fight number two is, the liberal, I don't like the word liberalism. That's, by the way, a trick. That we are all liberals because we believe in liberties. That's where that word comes from. So they took away that word. I don't feel like giving them the word. We believe in liberty. Remember, we're the Exodus people. Okay? So don't take that word away from me. So, but we know what we mean. We have to fight liberalism and homosexualism and sexual lasciviousness. And then number three, here's the beauty. I've heard this mentioned in the conference a few times. You're going to have to fight the rabbis. And when I say fight the rabbis, I use it not in the same meaning that I used fight Christianity and fight liberalism. It's more like fighting your kids to get more out of them. Let me give you an analogy from computers. Most of you, I hope, understand computers. Maybe some of you don't. Ask a neighbor. Somebody sent you a zip file Okay? A zip file has come in on your email. And there's that zip file, you put it now on your desktop. All the information is there. But nothing's happened until you extract that file. Okay? So if you don't right-click that zip file and say, extract all files, that thing is worthless to you. The Torah contains all this knowledge that you are seeking. It contains it. It's been in zip format for 2,000 years. It's got cobwebs on it. Okay? So you got to clear out the cobwebs. Then you got to right-click it, extract all files, and that's a process. You got to say, Rabbi Richmond, extract those files for me. I want an answer. I want answers. I demand more. And some people don't, some rabbis don't even know that the files are even on the desktop. They think it's some kind of junk. You got to say, no. You see this? This is real, and I'm real. I'm a person. I'm a person. I'm real, Rabbi. I'm standing in front of you, and I want more. So if you don't know the answer, I respect that. Can you please go find out? So that's a big burden, because you guys are Gentiles. You come into the rabbi, you have to have chutzpah, as I heard this said before. It's not easy. So therefore, I just outlined to you that you have to fight Christianity, fight liberalism, fight the rabbis. You have to demand more, unzip the file. And that sounds like a pretty heavy burden to me. And therefore, I also want to give you a very important piece of advice. And I'm telling this to you from the bottom of my heart. A very important piece of advice. All those things that I just said are true. But never forget to be joyful, happy, light, smile at life. Don't wake up in the morning and say, what a burden it is to be a Gentile. Okay. You know, they said, I don't remember who said it, but there was a rabbi who said that one of the worst things that ever happened was that Jews said it's hard to be a Jew. You don't wake up in the morning in Beit El Israel knowing that 1 billion Muslims want to destroy you and that your own government is out against you. You don't wake up in the morning saying, "Oy, being Jewish is hard." If you wake up like that, you've lost. Move to Brooklyn, okay? It's just not going to work. You want to make it work, you got to get up in the morning and say, God Almighty, Kodesh Baruch Hu, thank you so much for my life. Thank you for my wife. Thank you for my caravan and my dog. Thank you for putting me on this hilltop. I cannot be happier than to thank you for living in the land of Israel. And when you put on your tefillin, you say, whoo! When I put on my tefillin, sometimes I give the end strap to my daughter to chew on. And when that happens, I say to myself, I'm a lucky guy. And when you're going to be out there in Tennessee or wherever you are, and you think about the burdens that I just laid out, you may think to yourself, I don't know if I want this. Remember how lucky you are to serve God. And serving God must be done in joy. Joy is the gateway towards prophecy. Joy is the gateway towards true service of God. So in all these things, I want you to, when you see one another, embrace one another. I don't know what you do. We Jews, we have l'chaim sometimes. We, pour a shot of scotch or something. And have the joyousness of studying the Torah. Have the joyousness of living life. Never forget that. If you forget that and you become too heavy and morose, well, there's of course, that's just not a way to serve God, but there's another negative aspect of that, which is it stops being attractive. And another duty of yours is to make it attractive. People that see you are going to have to think, this is cool. This is amazing. These people have got it. They've got something going on. Look at the joy that they're living. So Noahidism has got to be synonymous with living life with joy. And what greater joy can there be than to serve God and to live our short lives with all its challenges, holding God hand in hand? Do you guys ever meditate? I meditate. And sometimes I meditate about just holding God's hand. And it gives me tremendous peace and nachas, as we say, comfort. Just the thought that I'm living life with God, that is just the most comforting thing. It's much better than trying to bring the gold and the bananas to my grave that I'm not going to take on. Okay, it's much more meaningful than that. So, I've made 3 points so far that I think are important. I just want to repeat them. One is the Metropolitan... how much time do I have left, Jim?
How are we doing?
All right.
26 minutes.
Very good.
26 minutes.
Perfect, 26. That's just right. The Metropolitan Museum of Art store, the fact that we've been in diaspora and you've been in diaspora, and the fact that you have to push the rabbis to unzip the zip file, and the fact that you need to always keep it light. Now, you are not alone. Here's prop number 2. I went to a supermarket here. It's called Publix, right? That's the supermarket in Florida. I found a cereal that I found quite tasty called Ezekiel 4:9. Take unto thee wheat and barley and beans and lentils and millet and spelt and put them in one vessel and make bread of it. Ezekiel 4:9. They've got a cereal named Ezekiel 4:9 in this country. And I thought to myself, well, this awakening is not far off. It's happening. I was proud. I picked this up. And it tasted good too. Skittles. I'm proud of this. I'm proud of this. I want to take this back to Israel. And I want to show people this. And I want to show them they are proud of the biblical heritage.
Don't forget, we also have a bear called Hebrew.
Hebrew, that's right. All right. This is pride in the Bible, the greatest book ever sold. They should sell this at the Metropolitan Museum of Art store. This is pride. And I was proud, really, I was proud. And it was right, because this is the human heritage, the great prophets of mankind. This is something to be proud of. So, as you can see, you're not really alone, and there's a tremendous thirst out there in America. I want to tell you something, I believe in America. I know it's got problems, but I think this is a country that has an open mind and has a good heart. Really one of the best hearts that the nations have ever produced, and you're lucky to live in this country. I'm not going to live here because I'm Jewish, and I'm excited about building my country, Israel. And I can't wait to see you in the Festival of Booths. And when I get to be prime minister one day, then we're going to make flights cheap. What's that? We'll import that cereal, that's right. And we're going to make flights cheap during booths. Instead of it being expensive, just like the Muslims have figured it out, that during their Hajj, they sponsor and underwrite the whole thing for millions. We're going to do that because the God of Israel is saying the nations shall come, the Jewish people should come to Jerusalem, and we're going to make it, it's going to be practically free. All right? So you wait for that. Now the last question is, how can Israel National Radio help? That's the title of the speech. I hijacked it for other topics, but how can Israel National Radio help? Well, first, I'm already working with Ray and probably going to end up working with Jim also and the good people that are the voices of this movement to get a radio show just about this topic. In fact, the radio show that we started called Light Unto the Nations with Ari and Jeremy was meant to be just that. It spun to a little bit of a different thing. You know, show hosts have their personality. I let them do what they really want to do. That's why I'm such a good manager, because I let people, be creative. But we want to have a no-hide show. We want to have a show every week that connects everybody. We live in a miraculous time of technology. All this conference is based around technology, from the emails to the planes that got us here, to the cellular phones, to everything, the microphone that I'm holding in my hand. God has issued forth this technology, and we're using it. As I've said before, the majority of the internet is pornography. Really, a large, vast amount is lasciviousness and junk. We do not stay away from technology. We delve into it to cleanse it. We're jumping into it, and we're going to make it into a holy vessel. And if we got to dive into the muck and scoop out the mud and chuck it out, we're going to do that. Because it's a holy vessel, because God has brought this knowledge into the world. So our radio station is going to take a Noahide show and make it happen. I want it to happen. It's going to happen with God's help. And the next thing that we have to do, and you've made me more excited about getting it done, is getting it on air here in America. Getting not just that show, but the station on air here. We got to fight that Metropolitan Museum of Art store. We got to fight it with an alternative message, and it's going to catch. It's going to catch because people are real inside. Okay? They know that they're not going to take it with them after they die. They know that. So people are real, and they're going to hear it, and we're going to get that station out here. By the way, We tried at some point to get our station out at XM radio, the satellite radio. Do you know who supposedly, I heard serious rumors, blocked it? Arab-owned stations like CNN and other things said, if you're going to get that station here, we're out. So the fight's on. If anybody out there thinks that it's like a low-grade fight, you're wrong. This is a day-to-day fight. And it's why I carry a pistol in Israel, but it's why I speak on the mic, and there is a war out there. There's a war of ideas out there. Islam is fast becoming the fastest growing religion. Why? Because it sows fear in people's hearts. And they have a great saying here in America, if you think about it very deeply, if you can't beat them, join them. People really think that. I can't beat these guys. I might as well just subsume myself into their corporateness. You guys are saying, I'm not going to be a Christian, and I'm not going to be a Muslim. I'm going to be the truth. That's a big fight that you're putting up. So we're going to have to get that show and all of our shows out on the air here. And I think that what Israel National Radio also has to do always is to be on the cutting edge and never to become too bourgeois and to be, you know, well, these guys are giving us money, so therefore maybe we shouldn't say it. I slam things like that. If I ever hear anything like that at my station, I come down like a hammer on them. We don't take kickbacks from Christians and from the good folks that support us. They support us because we're part of God's revelation. I'm not going to shut down my message and tell you that the J-man or the Y-man is okay because you're putting money in my pocket. You want to put money into our thing? Maybe we could talk about it. But we're certainly not going to bend our message. So our station has to continue to be truthful and has to give you guys a lifeline wherever you are, And what our station has to do is to make ideas happen. It's not just talk, it's also ideas. And I'm proud to say that it was kind of my sense that there were a lot of Gentiles listening to us, and therefore we have to start not changing our words, but stop talking in Hebrewish, you know? So if I wanted, I could make this whole speech in half Hebrew, half English. Okay? But I realize that there are people out there who are listening and they want to hear it, they have a heart to hear it, but they don't have the Jewish lingo that I've been carrying around for 2,000 years. So we had to start talking in English, start not tailoring the message, but making it understandable to you out there. And so we have to keep doing that without any fear. No fear is the motto of our station. And that's what we've been doing, and I feel great success. And I got to tell you that you're giving me a lot of heart, a lot of heart. And I want to conclude my statements here with one last thing, something that I came up with I'm very happy about. My favorite commandment, which has been bandied around here, is the tzitzit. I feel like it's one of the great things, really, because it's just a uniform of godliness. It's something so different. It's something so weird. And the weirder it is, the more godly it is. That's what I'm always saying. So I'm walking around with my four-cornered garment, and I realized something. The four-cornered garment has 3 different levels. The first level is keep away from sexual impurity. Remember the commandments. That's the initial impetus of the four-cornered garments, right? The initial impetus is see them and remember that you're Jewish, that you got to stay clean. The second impetus is 4 corners is also the same terminology used as the ingather. He will ingather us from the 4 corners of the world. So the tzitzit and the blue and white, the flag of Israel, is about ingathering. It's about bringing the Jewish people home together. And the third one is about the Gentiles who will latch onto the tzitzit and say, take me with you. I want to get closer to God. 3 levels. 1, be the Jew, be pure, be straight. Level 2, ingather, come back to the land of Israel. Level 3, outreach, touch the hearts of the Gentiles. They will want to grab onto you. Let that revolution happen. Be part of that. Be willing to teach. Be willing to love the peoples of this world. And that's exactly what our station does, and that's what I'm trying to do, and I want to thank you very much.